When I saw 4.6 last year and saw every presenter get to pick their own music, I thought this is awesome to rickroll the entire audience in one go. So I wrote Robert an email saying I want to talk about virtualized cloud-based threat intelligence for scalar systems, and here I am. In real life, I'm security architect at Alliander. Alliander is a DSO, a distribution systems operator, a grid operator in the Netherlands, and we provide energy for about a third of the country. In this talk, I would like to take you through the company. Why are we doing this smart grid thingy? And actually, what do we do to secure it? What do we see in threats? And how do we deal with them? To start, where did it all come from? In 1883, the Amstel Hotel in Amsterdam put a generator in the basement, started installing electric lights, and had, well, an electrified lighting for its customers. They used gas before that, pretty safety hazard, and they started to use electricity because it was a cool thing to have in that time. They had the generator, they had a lot of surplus electricity, so they started running wires to the houses next to them, and basically they became the first grid operator, even it was just to the neighbors. Next, yes. If you look at the company that we are today, we are a merger company. We had a lot of stadwerken, every city had its own utility, had its own power generation that started to go to provinces. So they merged together at the province level, and they started merging more and more and more, and now we have about 12 grid operators left. In 2006, the European Union said we have to split generation and distribution. So we started to split again. Nuon, the mother company, was split into Nuon and Alliander. Alliander the grid part, Nuon the production part, and Nuon is now part of Vattenfall. But you see, we are over there, and we are basically a merger company. And you see that in all parts of the company still, especially in OT automation, especially in all the various systems that we use to control the grid. I work at the digital grids department. We started 6 years ago. We should merge IT, OT, because OT is, well, basically also managing computers. So why should we have two groups at the same, doing basically the same thing, although the area where they do it is, can be quite different. So we started doing that, and we had some interesting results. We've been doing it for about three and a half years now. People are still quite happy about it. We found some interesting things, that people doing the same kind of work earn different amounts of money. So the IT people make much more money for managing systems than the OT people, even if you can debate what is the real important system here. The IT budget size helps also the OT people for installing new things and getting new things done. And we're still working on building more and more trust between the two communities. Because the people themselves, the organizational, how they feel and how they work is quite different. And to be honest, the OT people in the beginning were not really that happy that they saw that IT is taking over our property. And some of them were really, really adamant. We used to have systems like this. So we had a substation which is centrally, decentrally controlled. So actually the controller used to live there with his family, his wife, his kids, and the dog. And he would get a phone call from a central location on how he should switch the system for the energy flows. And as an electrical engineer, which I'm by trade, it's awesome to still see that installation and the craftsmanship that went into building it. But we're automating more and more, and now it's all centrally controlled, and the control system is computerized. And that system is now represented just as a small sign on the big board. But it's still controlling that same installation that's now about 50 years old. So within the company, we also moved from local control, so from a DCS system, to a SCADA system. And then, of course, little Bobby is unavoidable. However, I'm still waiting for the hedgehog. And because not everybody here is from the energy distribution industry, I would like to take you to a quick tour on a substation. What is actually the substations that we have? One of them, a typical one, we have, as you saw, a merchant company, we have very different ones. But the typical one I would like to show you so you get a bit of a feel, what actually are we talking about when we talk about automation in the grid. A picture from a typical 150 kilovolt substation, quite near to my old house. And the structure is very similar. It's some minor details, but they all roughly work in the same way. If you look at it, you see two sets of lines running clearly across the substation. This is the bus bar. This is what we use to connect equipment to and from, so we can have energy flow from one point to the other point. We have lines connecting systems to the bus bar with accompanying systems. On the left side, we have lines feeding the station and lines leaving the station. And on the right side, we have transformers and we have capacitors, and we'll get to those. We connect them using switches and separators. Switches act really fast, so if I have to switch 110 kV, distance will take care of the isolation. So I have to switch really fast, otherwise I get a nice arc across the contact point. Switch it fast, they yank a pin down and the power is cut off directly. You can compare it to the on-off switch on your coffee machine. It's a really fast action. We have separators, which you can compare to the plug of your coffee machine. So I can plug it out of the wall and then it's really separated. Well, that's similar, but on a different scale. We also have in the substation. We have transformers who convert voltage from a high voltage to a low voltage. And we have capacitor banks that will adjust the power factor when needed. And we can come back to that in a while. But these are the main components of a substation. Now let's put the station in operation. We close switches, we raise the separators, and we connect components to the bus bar. And energy can start flowing. If you look at our SCADA system, it's represented like this. So we have separators. The bus bar is now just one line, because you have 3 phases, that's everywhere, so we'll just represent it by one line. We have switches. We have transformers in operation. The different color indicate different voltage levels. And we have one transformer that is currently in maintenance. So there's no electricity flowing through it. And you can see this SCADA representation of the substation nicely maps to the actual substation that's out there in the field. Where do we need all this for? Grid stability, availability and grid stability. We have very narrow margins that we have to operate between, especially the frequency is very important. And we have to make sure if there's too much supply, then the grid frequency will go up and the grid voltage will go up and basically burn out all kinds of equipment. If there's too much demand, so not enough supply, then the frequency will drop and the voltage will drop as well. And there are synchronous motors running on the grid that rely on the 50 Hertz to be 50 Hertz. So they use the 50 Hertz to stay in sync. And if the frequency varies too much, then those motors will actually break. That was all well for, say, the last 100 years. Because people are very predictable. We wake up in the morning, and we sleep at night. We wake up in the morning, we consume a lot of energy. We go to the office, we go to work, we consume a little bit less energy. We come back at home in the evening, we start cooking, we start watching television, and then we go back to sleep again. This pattern, well, we still have this pattern, but this pattern nicely follows, the energy consumption followed this pattern nicely. And this is a model of demand-driven supply, so we know roughly how much supply we need at a certain point at a certain time, and we can produce that amount of energy and not more and not less. However, times are changing. We have a lot of decentral green energy being fed into the grid at the moment. And well, typically at night it's windy. and during the daytime the sun is shining. And those are exactly the moment then we don't need that much energy. And at the moment that we have a lot of energy, well, we don't consume that much energy. So there's a nice imbalance there, there's an imbalance there that we have to deal with as a grid operator. And some numbers, well, these are 2014 numbers. We saw the number of solar panels grow quite substantially, and we saw the number of charge stations for electric vehicles even double. And electric vehicles are nice beasts, because they are basically big batteries on wheels, and at one moment they plug in this part of your grid, they drive a bit, and then they plug in a completely different part of the grid. So I have no way of predicting where I have to supply that energy for the car to charge. Another nice example of this happened in 2007. We have these pylons to distribute, to have the lines hanging on to distribute energy. Our military has these. And if you combine the two, then accidents happen. And I still think this is a great Viagra ad, but that's okay. It was a line cut over the River Rhine, which is the main river between the port of Rotterdam and Germany. This was the affected area. It was 50,000 people without electricity. And if you look into the grid at that time in that area, it looked like this. So we have 150 kV feeding in the red line that's been distributed throughout the area. But there's only one line feeding it, and of course the helicopter hit exactly there. So that happened on 12 December in 2007, a cold winter night, 50,000 people without electricity. It took us 48 hours to reconnect everybody. And there was about 8 million euros in damages, of which 4 million euros we had to pay in storingsverbruikersmunten, were measured by outage minutes per customer per year. And if you have no electricity for 4 hours, then every minute that you don't have electricity after those 4 hours, you get a compensation. So we had to pay about 4 million euros in compensation. So this happened on a cold winter night. However, that line feeding the area was only used for 3% of its capacity. So it's at night, so people watching television, having the heating on, doing the cooking. It's cold, lots of heating. But still, so it's the most peak moment we have on the grid, but still the line feeding that area was only used for 3%. Why is that? If you look at the area from the top, courtesy of Google Maps, the line that was cut is all the way to the left. And here you see all kinds of greenhouses. And the nice thing of having a greenhouse in the Netherlands, you get a subsidy on the gas that you need to heat your greenhouse to grow tomatoes. And with that excess heat, you can produce electricity. And at that time, you could even make more money producing electricity than growing tomatoes. So there was enough local generation in that area that we only had to feed in 3% of the total line capacity. So the area roughly would be able to keep itself up and running if we had a means to control supply and demand in that localized area. We didn't have that, so the entire area went still down. So balancing supply-demand is an important thing to do. We have roughly 3 ways to make sure that we can supply enough energy at any time, at any moment. We can put in much more cables into the ground, and we calculated it would cost about 7 billion euros for the coming 10 years to be roughly capable of doing that. We can make the grid smarter, have more control also on a decentralized level, and be able to run the capacity of the grid closer to its design limits. Or we can make people simply less dependent on energy. And we go smart grids for the win, which is the most cost-effective thing to do in our vision, in our view. Expand control also on the decentralized level. Look at smart charging of electric vehicles. So if an entire street starts charging their electric vehicles all in one go, then we really have a problem of getting enough energy into that street to charge all the cars. So we have to find a balanced way of doing that. Energy storing, and in our vision for the coming 10 years, we want to be a data-driven grid operator. Awesome. So smart grids for the win. NIST tried to make a model of the smart grid with all the parties and all the systems talking to each other that are required for a well-functioning smart grid. And this is a simplified model. And if you look at the bottom right, only this part is smart metering. So smart metering equals smart grids? Not really. It's much, much, much more than just smart metering. Actually, this is the area that we as a company are currently operating in, and we're looking into expanding in other areas of smart grid operation as well. For smart grids, we used to do automation of substations like these, and this is the main one feeding Amsterdam, and having it centrally controlled in our control center. And of course, everybody recognized the station I showed you earlier. But we're going to extend our network and control also to places like this, literally in the middle of nowhere. And that poses some interesting security questions. And those questions are also fed by, well, the common security themes that we as a company have, as everybody else does. Default passwords, service backdoors, open wireless, no secure design. Lots of people telling me writing policy, not that many people helping me to implement that policy. And also more than enough people telling me that I'm doing it wrong. Robert Lee this morning, I fully agree with him. I mean, we stuck in general at defense, so why even bother doing offense? I'm not ready for that. And as at the Digital Grids department, we also noticed it's interesting that IT is replacing its servers every 3 years. So a complete rack, 42U rack with servers is replaced after 3 years because the lease expired. And that's okay, but it's not okay to replace a 10K RTU in an old substation. So, interesting. And smart grids for the win, but the business doesn't care about days, key length, algorithm sizes. So your typical IT non-4.6 security expert goes, oh my God, we're all going to die. Really? It's a slide on ICS security, so you gotta have a mushroom cloud in there. I learned that one from Patrick Gray. So what we do with that in Alliander? Well, first we decided what is security? And really scoped what do we do and what do we not do. In 2012, our CEO underwrote the World Economic Forum resilience principles, and we derived our resilience vision from that. So we are a resilient organization capable of anticipating threats against our mission. Woo. What does that mean? Well, resilience, what is resilience in the first place? I like to compare resilience with an escalator. If I put in energy, it brings me to the next level. Awesome. If I don't provide energy, it's still stairs. I can still reach the other level. So that's a nice example of resilient design. The analogy goes even further. If I centrally apply power, everybody benefits. If I don't put in centralized power, each individual person has to expend some energy to reach the next level if he or she really wants. So we have to think, okay, how do we design systems like these? And then we have a problem. Basically, as humans, we suck at risk management. I live in an area that will be flooded every 1250 years. I have no idea what that means. And I have no idea how to do risk calculations with that. And there's a very nice book written on how we as humans perceive risk and what motivates us to think about risk and how we think which risks are important and which ones aren't. And, well, they're depressing books if you read them. Nicely summed up in this quote by Aaron, which I really like. The level of trust in the infrastructure is inversely linear to the amount of knowledge of that infrastructure. Everybody trusts the grid. We're all sitting here trusting the electricity will be there, because well, we have no clue how it works. And I recognize myself in this one too, because the cloud, of course, is run by My Little Ponies, right? But I digress. From that resilience vision, we derived our security mission. What is security for us? We are protecting the mission of Alliander and their stakeholders. by securing our crown jewels against intentionally caused damage caused through human actions. And that's a very nice scope. So it is intentionally caused damage through human actions. Why is that nice? Well, the nature isn't out there to get you wet. At least that's not proven. So if it's raining, then the rain isn't trying to get you wet, and a simple umbrella will keep you dry. However, if a heron is trying to get you, he is hungry, he's very motivated to eat you, so he will continue and continue and continue until he gets you. And that also does something for your controls. If I translate that to an IT example, lost USB sticks can be a problem. So what do? Well, I'm not going to prevent the loss of the USB stick. That's not intentionally done. Nobody deliberately, let me lose this USB stick. I mean, if somebody does that, you have a different problem. The control against losing a USB stick would be a heavy chain and a nipple clamp. You'll guaranteed not lose that USB stick anymore. However, I want to protect myself from somebody maliciously finding that USB stick and using that data on that stick for different purposes or maliciously. So I am going to encrypt that USB stick. So there you see, the scoping really helped us to focus on what should we do and what we don't care about. Human actions, our asset management department responsible for the cables and the transformers has been doing risk management for 100 years, and they have statistical data for the last 100 years, and they can really use that to really accurately predict when components will fail. Because their adversary is nature, and nature isn't out there to blow up that transformer. Nature is just nature, and, well, transformers deteriorate over time. They use a risk matrix for that, which is sometimes tricky to use within security, because we have different threats. We have motivated adversaries. But we still map our security risks. So we look at, okay, how is this adversary, how motivated is he to attack me, what capabilities does he or she have, and how much opportunity do I give them to attack my system. And if you look at controls, especially that opportunity part is something that I have influence on. I cannot really influence somebody's motivation to go after the grid, but I have controls to prevent the capability, to prevent the opportunity that I give them to attack my systems. But we still need to map that risk back to the AAM, to the asset management matrix, because ultimately they're the ones with the budget, they're the ones with the big bag of money that I need to spend on my security controls. So that is a lot of risk management. Is that boring? It can be, but it's also a great way to hack your company, to find how your company works, and to really use it to your advantage to, in the end, get what you were after. So formulating the risk owner helps me as well as a security practitioner to, okay, what is really the essence of the risk and what are we really trying to do here? Or is this just FUD that we heard in some chat channel? And my CEO is not stupid. He really gets why security is important, which is really nice, but has a different mode, and we'll get to that as well. We really do understand our own impact, so a lot of media outage is not really helping us by blowing more smoke up his nostrils. So in our risk management process, we are very pragmatic with it. You should do a plan, do, check, act according ISO 27001. I have no idea what I should do in an act phase, so we just took it out and made a loop so that everybody understands it and can work with it. And security research, as example, presented at 4.6, for example, is one of the inputs that we use to feed our risk model. Incidents really happen, really help. They happen, but they also really help. This is the best incident that we had up till now. It was 2012 when an Austrian writer wrote a book about a European-wide blackout caused by smart metering and some clever SCADA hacks. I bought 5 copies of them, and I gave one to my CIO. And well, after 3 days, he came back, a bit more white around the nose, and we had a really good discussion. Okay, how technically feasible is this? How possible is this? And is the impact presented in this book really how it would go? So, well, I did my fact-checking before, of course. And I showed him, well, in this small, minute technical details, it would not be possible. But still, in general sense, it's a nice book. And I'm still not sure if we should make this book mandatory to read or forbidden. It's available in German, Polish, Italian, Dutch, and there will be an English translation in 2017. And of course, Ukraine. Interesting case that everybody likes to use now, but there's not that much data that I have, so not really sure how to use it. What I do know is that this is the affected region. I have no idea why they did it. There are no nuclear installations there. There is a big gas distribution point feeding to Europe, so that might be interesting. Were it the Russians? I don't care that much about attribution. I also don't care that much about black energy. I mean, fishers are gonna fish, so they'll find, if they want to get in, they'll find a way to get in. But if you think about it, if it were the Russians, then they have blown a really nice capability. Because everybody now knows that this is a possibility. So everybody is fixing their systems. So taking away a certain attack path and certain capabilities for an attacker to be able to pull this off. So they might have had some tactical goals, the attackers, don't know who it was, they might have had some tactical goals of taking down that part of the grid. But on a strategic level, I'm not sure if it was a wise move. So I'm not sure if it was done from a higher strategic purpose. I didn't see this one yet in the slides, but I really like this one. So yes, we had a statement from the IAEA guy. I don't know why he made it, what his agenda was there, but journalists picked it up, and suddenly the UN has nuclear power plants, and they're building dirty bombs, and there's no fact that I could find that would feed this news story. Interesting side note, we laugh at this because we are experts on this field, so we know all the false statements that are in here. However, all the other news stories of ZDNet we take for sweet candy. So, interesting reflection. But where do we go from here, as William was saying? It's best not to have the risk in the first place. So we started to, against the European regulations, but we started to remove the switch from the smart meter. We could not find a valid use case for having a switch in there that would justify the risk of having a remote on-off control of somebody's household. So we went to the vendors and said, well, take the switch out. We didn't want it. That was quite new. As far as I know, we're the only country yet that are doing this. But this really helped us in reducing risk, because we do have some privacy concerns to think about. And we're thinking about them very hard, and we're doing all kinds of controls to mitigate those. But the impact on the grid is not there anymore. So you cannot hack my smart meter and turn off my house. Awesome. Where do we go from here? Well, realize it's a journey. Be honest, and I like to use the 5 stages of loss and grief for that. And also with the integration IT-OT, we thought first, there's the denial. Nobody's going to attack my system. The isolation, who would do that? Then there's the anger. Why are they doing this? And they shouldn't do that, and they should stop. Bargaining. Well, yeah, well, we have some things to fix, but there's another DSO that has more things to fix, so we're not doing that bad. And 4th step is getting into depression. We're all going to die. And finally, you have acceptance, and you can start building. And according to my therapist, I'm currently at this level. We're going to connect everything together. It's a reality. We just have to deal with it. We're going to add new ways of connecting. Security development is not part of the regular curriculum. I think it's awesome that there are security education and security programs at universities. However, I can still go 4 years to MIT and never have to think about security. That's something I think we should fix too. Security should be an integral part of all education. And of course, security industry found a new bandwagon. That's something I have to deal with it too. This is a model that we use for thinking about security. We're anticipating that we're going to be attacked at some point. We're going to be breached. It's going to happen. We want to make that a certain level of difficult, but somebody will eventually breach us. We want to check, is that level, that certain level of difficult, still at the level that we agreed upon? If somebody releases a module for Metasploit tomorrow, then that level could suddenly drop significantly. So that's part of the attention phase. Is that level still where we want it to be? Did somebody come over that level? So did somebody jump the fence and is he inside my system? That's what I want to detect, and then we can respond to that depending on how they got in, what they did, and how fast we can get them out. And then we have a loop back. Okay, this happened. Is this something we should have prevented, or is this acceptable? Acceptable. Can we explain, well, this could happen, and they crossed the bar that we all agreed upon, and well. So it should be a certain level of difficult. And on a scale from Brenno de Winter, which is a locally world-famous tech journalist, and the NSA, how difficult should it be? Brenno de Winter is too easy. He should not be able to get into our system. Everybody agrees on that. The NSA, oh, they're very capable and have huge resources, and they're going to succeed. Everybody accepts that too. But where should we be in that line? That's still an interesting question. And building that line, well, we use standards, of course. So we run with the 27002 and 27019, which is an energy sector adaptation of the 20002. So we use this as a baseline to build a certain level of difficult to breach my system. And we use a lot of published resources also to get a more accurate feel of what should we do. How strong should my keys be? What kind of encryption algorithms should I use? And as a sector, we work together to build common RTU requirements, for example, that if we are going to buy an RTU from a vendor, we can say these are our security requirements, and these should at least meet these requirements. And it's not just our company doing this, but we're doing that with all the DSOs in the Netherlands. So we're building a de facto national requirement set of RTU requirements. On the preventative side, we used to build systems like castles. Everybody knows the metaphor. Nice big wall, but very crunchy on the inside once you're in. But you saw the NIST model. We have a lot of parties to communicate with. So we're moving more and more to a hotel model where we have sets of data in every room and have access control in every room so we can determine what data do we share with what party. For that, we segmented our network. Everybody says you have to segment your network, it's important. Yesterday in KIPS you could buy segmentation for a price that was, oh, I wish it were true. This is extremely hard to do and very, very expensive in a running company because we cannot afford any downtime. So it's really expensive to build a new network, migrate systems over, and interesting discussions to be had there. This picture is intentionally blurred because we don't want to end up as some other grid operators found when they had their Ukraine networks exposed. So keeping the level up, we look at research, we look at presentations that are done, and we're going to translate them. Is this relevant for us? And, well, of course, this is not threat intelligence, but this is basically what threat intelligence should be. The intelligence part, is it relevant for my company? Is it relevant for my system? If Kaspersky or Symantec or whoever, FireEye says, oh, we see a lot of attacks coming from this source and attacking these systems. Well, if I don't have those systems, then that's not threat intelligence for me. So doing threat intelligence, you really should work on getting the data in and translating it. The end goal is situational awareness. And not just on an IT side, but also how do people look at my company in a media level? Are my employees happy to work here? So is insider threat something to work about? My colleague DSO found something. Should I be worried about this? So intelligence is much more, and situational awareness is much, much more than just looking at IP numbers and URLs where you can download malware. We practice defense in depth, but that's just much more than just having 2 brands of firewall. That's really thinking about your controls and how are your controls adding to each other. I have a firewall here to prevent something, but if they go around it, they could. So do I have a resilient measure that will help me if my firewall would fail? And if you're not detecting anything, so if you have, say, a Cisco firewall and a Juniper firewall, and somebody attacks the Cisco firewall and is able to breach it, if I still give him a year time to go the next step and to attack my Juniper firewall, well, I've delayed him a year, but I have no clue that somebody is actually past the first layer and start bounding on my second layer. So I have to detect, and that's the same as a castle analogy. You have 2 walls, but you could see the enemy reaching the first wall, so you could start cooking the oil to pour over him. So detection is key. Are my measures up to spec? Did anyone breach them? Do simple stuff first. Last 4, 6, there were quite a lot of presentations on honeypots, which is awesome for detecting lateral movement in my network, but also on the internet, what's actually out there trying to attack systems like these. But if somebody connects a Linux laptop in my substation, that's easy to detect. So those simple things really help you already to raise the bar quite high. For detection, there's some interesting choices ahead. We use the 104 protocol to communicate centrally with substations. And there's now a new version of that, or there's a new extension of that to make it secure, to add TLS to the protocol and encrypt it from the RTU into my SCADA system. Awesome. Not sure. Because if I encrypt that path, then I can no longer see inside it what's going on. So I can only see that if some strange IP address is connecting, maybe, but I cannot no longer look into the traffic to see if the commands that are being sent to the RTU are really coming from the substation, or that the commands are within a certain bandwidth of what's acceptable for the central system to send to my RTUs, and are the values that the RTU sends back to the central system, are they still within a certain bandwidth of expected behavior? So I lose that capability. So encrypt all the things, I'm not sure yet, which of course puts me firmly in the big brother camp. But I don't like people being able to hide in the security controls that I use to actually secure my systems. A very nice book for this is Data-Driven Security, written by the guys who also do the Verizon Data Breach Report. And they really help you to go, okay, what should we measure and how can we derive values from those measurements? How do we represent them? How do we visualize them? And really help you to get away from a gut feel, well, this is kind of important, to this is important because I have the data to back those claims. Correlation, which will be the next step after all the measurements. So I want to have the capability to say, I see a door opening in my substation. I have no work permit in my work order management system. I have no outage reported on the substation. And I see strange traffic on the network. Those 4 events together really make a strong case that there is somebody who shouldn't be there. And I can send the police. We use a use case-based SIEM model for this. So we have a SIEM system that is detecting events in IT, but also in OT, and can correlate between events across those domains. So we can see if an attack is starting on the IT side and then migrates to the OT side. To ultimately feed into our new, we're building this at the moment, the Leander control room, which will be a control room where we have not just grid operations, but also telecom operations, smart grid operations, IT operations, security operations, all in one room to quickly connect with each other, that if there's an event happening at some point, others may be affected and can act on that. For the research part, research is not a core competency of us. We're a grid operator, we distribute energy, but we work closely with a number of companies to do grid operation, to research into securing grid operations. And when we find something interesting, then we can see how can we make this production ready and how can we use this in real life. So that's all for the detection part. And then, of course, if an incident happens, we run like the fire department. We have an IT-OT mixed security response team. We had nice caps printed, because paraphernalia are important, I think. We prepare mandated action scenarios that if this happens, we are authorized to take certain actions without consulting. However, if it gets bigger, we have a link to the official crisis team to make, at the business level, decisions on how we should act. Interesting, IT people typically go, save the server, the data is important, and the OT people go, oh, save the process, I don't care about that server, it can burn. And then, of course, there's forensics. We used to nuke from orbit, reinstall and be done with it, but we're moving more and more into, that's interesting, what does it do? So we built a security lab for that, and you see my colleague just diving out of the picture. You can still find him somewhere here in the audience. Looking at, I found some malware, what does it do? And we use commonly available techniques at the moment for this. What are the vulnerabilities it used? What binaries did it drop? Are there things that I can use to identify if I have it in other places on my network? And how targeted was it at my company? Or is this just generic malware? So this is not our core competency. We're not going to reverse analyze all the binaries that we find. We're a grid operator, we're distributing energy. But we should at least understand the concept and know how to talk to a specialized company to use this. And we're always working on growing our team. Awareness is not hard. If you had an incident and you run like the fire department, use it as an advantage or use it as a communication point. So tell people what happened and also act if somebody prevented the breach. So if somebody found a USB stick and reported it, or had a USB stick in the mail and reported it, we gave cake to the entire department. And, okay, we stopped this one, awesome. So people have a positive stimulus to if I think rationally about security, I get cake, awesome. If my colleague DSO had an incident, we go to the risk owner, look, this happened in Ukraine, these are the steps, this how we would have prevented this specific attack, but the general attack vector in this point could work with us too, for example. So we go to the risk owner. We make security advices also applicable for home users. We have an Adobe patch that we need to deploy in IT. Well, you can write something on your intranet site. So, oh, by the way, if you go home tonight, it's really good to hit the update button because we found some stuff. So you become also a trusted partner for your employees. So they don't fear the security team, but they're just a bunch of guys you can talk to and who really understand security. And if we have security sessions during lunch or we have security presentations, the room is always overbooked. So there's always more people wanting to hear about security than we have room to accommodate. So that's, I think, a real win for security awareness. And if you have to call it awareness training, then you basically already have lost, because training is mandatory. Partnering, finally. Well, if we find something, we do like to share a lot of information. So we partner on the national level in the Energy ISAC. We partner in the European level, in the European Energy ISAC. We used to participate in the MISP from Circle.lu, but we're going to move to the Dutch search version. And we partner also at the crisis level with the Cyber Incident Response Board for government crises. So having a good relation with the security community is vital, especially when somebody calls you at 3 a.m. and asks, do you know what happened in Ukraine? Well, you want to know who is the guy on the other line, and if he's calling me at 3 a.m., then it must be really important. So it requires trusted partners. Well, I'm being here, drinking beer, and sharing stroopwafels really helps with that. So with that, I would like to go to questions.
Thank you very much. You really covered it all, from human resources to encryption. Absolutely great presentation, thank you. So we will just skip to the questions quickly and see what we got. Always a surprise. So, well, that is a detail from your presentation. How do you see household-owned demand control affecting the grid stability?
We care, that's not nice to say, but we care for the grid up till the point that it enters the house. So if somebody behind that has home control automation, then that's fine. So I'm not really sure how you see demand control affecting grid stability. What we see, however, people more and more doing is, personal example, I have 20 solar panels on my roof, and if the sun is shining, I turn on my dishwasher. Because I know at that moment I have free electricity, so all the electricity I don't have to buy from the grid is my saving. So that helps us into flattening peaks that are on the grid. And as a grid operator, we really like that. And we are looking into ways, so part of the smart grid is not just technology, but it's also looking in ways how we can entice customers to also think more about how they can work on balancing energy, because in the end, it just saves the money.
Which is good for
Which
everyone.
is good. Yep.
So, oops, went too far, I think. No. Now we're back on the military. Aye. That's my fault, probably. No.
Ah, nice and freezing.
Spoil it. No, we can just continue. I
Can use
appreciate
the other
it.
one.
Yeah, but okay. So, what is the maturity of smart grid and smart meter solutions at the moment? How to control the added complexity, and should you really prefer that people save some analog equipment, just to be sure?
I have to admit, I do have a generator at my house, so. So for the smart meters, for example, I think that for the risks that they introduce, we have good meters. So the controls they provide really mitigate a number of risks, and especially because we took the switch out, we don't have the risk of somebody controlling the energy anymore. We just have the privacy risks left, but those can be dealt at a completely different level than we would have with grid disruptions. So that really helped us into getting the meters more adequate for what they are. And even if you don't have switches, there are some basic controls that you can use. For example, that every meter has its own encryption key. That requires you to handle 6 million encryption key, but that's not rocket science anymore. So those simple measures make it that if I breach one part of the system, I don't automatically scale to all the other parts of the system. And that really helps in getting the risk down. However, that's in the Netherlands. Every country in Europe has their own implementation of smart meters. So,
yeah. So how local would you like to make your distributed control? Are we talking about neighborhood or a few houses? And do you want these stations to communicate with each other?
Yeah, we're looking at suburbs. That suburbs can balance, because balancing within one household is doable. But it's really, if I turn on a dishwasher, then immediately my consumption jumps up. And if suddenly the sun starts shining, immediately my production jumps up. So there are really rough peaks in the grid. So if you level that out with, say, 200 households, or say 1,500 households, then those peaks really start to shave off a bit. So that's the level we're looking at. The end goal is that you have a self-sustaining area, which has an uplink that if there's a surplus, they can drop the uplink, and if they have a temporary shortage, that they can still buy in energy from that uplink. Do the systems have to communicate with each other? I think that would be helpful, but not necessarily. Same with grid operations. If you take down the SCADA system, the grid is going to be there still. Energy is still going to flow. However, we have no means of controlling it directly. So the risk of losing power is not there instantly.
Okay, well, thank you. We have to finish up. I could urge you all to run off to the bookstore and buy at least half of the books that you recommended because they're truly good reading. A lot of them, especially them about risk management or risk assessment and how people look at risks in general. So thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. And give him a warm hand.
Thank you.
Erwin Kooi.